Good afternoon, my name is Camden. It's a snowy day in New Hampshire and I'm going to be telling you about all the books that I DNF'd this year. If you are not a frequent flyer on the Bookternet, you may not know that DNF stands for Did Not Finish. So today I'm basically going to be going over all of the books that I started but did not finish this year and the reasons why I put them down. The first book that I want to talk to you about is one that I DNF'd all the way back in January of 2020, and that is The Family Plot by Megan Collins. This book is about a family who has been raised and homeschooled on a secluded island. We're following one of the daughters in this family as she is kind of trying to put the pieces together of why her twin brother went missing many years ago. Not very far into this book, they end up finding the body of the missing twin on the island with an axe in his skull. I ended up putting this book down at 28%, so I feel like I gave it a pretty good run. I mean, that's almost a third of the book. But my biggest gripe with this book was the fact that this whole family was like purportedly very interested in true crime and they knew everything about serial killers and that was like their whole shtick. I'm sorry, but as a person who is also very invested in true crime, it would not take me years and years and years to even ever so slightly suspect that maybe my twin is dead and maybe his body's on the island. It just bothered me so much that she's like, I'm the queen of true crime, and then she like was so shocked to find out that her twin didn't just run away from home at like a ridiculously young age and he hadn't been out there like living his best life in the big city. I'm taking away your true crime queen sash for that one. The next book on this list was really popular, and so I feel really horrible to say that I DNF'd it and didn't like it, but that is Beasts of Prey by Ayana Gray. I really hate it when the synopsis of a book seems to focus so heavily on one aspect of the plot, and then that aspect of the plot only lasts for like 2 chapters. The description of this book seems to revolve around this night zoo that our characters are working at. They kind of have like a debt that they owe, and so they're working off this debt by handling animals at this night zoo. But that is like literally like they escape from the night zoo in like chapter 2 and it never comes up again, and it made me really upset that this was just kind of like the kickoff to the plot and not actually anything to do with the plot itself. Throughout the rest of the book that I read, they are going on like this quest and going through the jungle. There's a lot of West African mythology and folklore woven in, and I feel like it's probably a great book and it's probably just me, but like after that aspect died off that I had been so looking forward to, I just couldn't get on board with like what the substitute plot was when I was like really excited for the night zoo aspect of it. This is where like the marketing of a book can have such a strong impact on people's enjoyment of it. If you set people up to expect one thing and then give them something completely different, it's obviously going to lead to a lot of disappointment. So this one's like not on the author at all, and it's like totally on the marketing team for having focused so heavily on night zoo as like a buzzword. I did still give this one quite a good chance, and I made it about 40% of the way through the book before putting it down. The next book that I DNF'd this year is Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This book brought up a lot of pet peeves for me. One really big pet peeve I have in a story is when you don't give characters like real names. I ran into this problem when I read the Boyfriend Book Club. Is that what it's called? The Bromance Book Club. That's what it's called. The Bromance Book Club. There's a character in there called the Russian, and I hated the fact that we called him the Russian throughout the entire book. You're just boiling someone down to like one small aspect of their personality and then allowing that to like base their entire personality around like a stereotype and not really developing the character at all. So in this book, we're following a main character and her 4 aunts who are helping her cover up a murder in self-defense. But throughout the entire book, we're calling them Aunt 1, 2, 3, and 4, which made me really upset because obviously I cannot connect to a character that's named 1, 2, 3, or 4 and has absolutely no personality at all outside of like kind of being a stereotype. I also just did not find it funny that we were like covering up someone being killed. Even if that person was killed in self-defense, I still don't think it like justifies like using that as like a humorous plot point throughout the book. And that's like pretty much what the whole book surrounds, like what kicks off the plot, and then obviously there's like a love story, and I just felt like that was so icky to me and I could not continue. I know this book was like really well loved by a lot of people, but for me it was an absolute no-go. The next book on this list is Northwind by Gary Paulson. This one just was not what I was expecting. We're following a character named Leaf. He's like a sailor or whatever, but I was just expecting something very similar to like Hatchet, like a survival story. So this book ended up being really boring for me. I DNF'd it at 15%. My fault really. I didn't have the right expectations going into it, so it wasn't what I was expecting at all, and I wasn't enjoying what I had. The next book that I DNF'd this year was I'll Never Tell by Catherine Mackenzie. I took issue with this book because I just found the plot to be pretty unbelievable. Basically, this family has owned this like children's summer camp for years. It's by a lake. Everyone loved it. All of the kids went. They made all their friends there. And recently the parents have passed away and all of the kids are gathering back together to read the will and figure out like who inherited the summer camp. However, we also have this plot point of like a mysterious death that happened at the camp of one of the girls' like best friends many years ago, and it never was solved, and yada yada. You know how a thriller goes. But, and I hope this is like not a spoiler because it happens pretty early in the book, they read through the will and their father basically says that he believes that one of his children killed her, and so he's going to make like a game out of the will to figure out like who killed her. I just couldn't buy it, you know what I mean? I feel like if you really suspected your kid killed someone, like you would have confronted them during your life. I don't know. I DNF'd it after that happened. The next book that I DNF'd this year is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. This book is probably the one that I DNF'd the quickest. I DNF'd it on chapter 3, which was like page 8 or something, because the writing was so egregiously bad. If you want to see a perfect example of like snobby writing and like being like intensely overwritten, read this book, but really don't, because it was so bad. I DNF'd it, chapter 3, 8 pages. I could not push myself any further than that. This book is supposed to be about a family who is going to like an Airbnb situation, and then another family shows up. It kind of gives like Us vibes just from the description, but I don't think that it's similar to Us really at all beyond that plot point. However, because it was so overwritten, it would take an entire page to describe like the setting of the car. I remember there was a line about how the youngest daughter smelled like spoiled milk, and she was like 12, so like why would she smell like spoiled milk, and why was that a thing that we needed to like discuss ad nauseum? You know what I mean? The next book that I DNF'd this year is one that I was super excited for and really wanted to love, and that is For All Time by Shanna Miles. This book is following two teenagers who are developing a relationship between them. Supposedly throughout the book we're supposed to see the fact that like they have been lovers throughout all of their lives together. So in each reincarnation they end up finding each other and like falling in love again, and then being split up, and like they just keep having like this across like time and space romance. The concept of this book just sounded so good, and almost kind of like one of my favorite books called Midwinter Blood by Marcus Sedgwick. But in execution, I just couldn't get on board with the relationship. This may sound like really stuck up of me, but I just like couldn't buy that like these two teenagers who are like drinking out of red Solo cups at like a teenage party and then like breaking up and like having a bunch of drama. Like, this isn't a long-lasting relationship that has spanned across eons to me. So in the end, I really couldn't buy it, and if you don't buy the relationship in this story, I feel like there's no way you'll enjoy the story. The next book that I DNF'd this year is The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentile. This book is like a kind of closed door mystery. It's about a scream that is heard throughout a library, and these four people who are like all hanging out together in like the quiet room. A woman turns up dead shortly thereafter, and they're trying to like put together what happened that like led up to her death and like who was responsible for her death. I feel like the actual story of this could be good, but the way that this one was told and like kind of a gimmick that the author used in this story is what dampened my enjoyment of it. So basically, the actual story that we are reading about the woman screaming in the library is a manuscript that she is sending to one of her friends who is a writer. And one of the characters in the story is a writer. So I feel like that might be like a little bit of like self-insertion there. But I would be like here reading the story, enjoying what's happening, enjoying seeing everything unfold, and then the other writer that she had sent the manuscript to would like add like editing notes like, oh, I think this is great, but I've attached like a map of the area so you can familiarize yourself with some of the local pubs and like add them to your story. And then the next chapter she would like add a local pub to the story. And the notes of the other author just like every time would like pull me right out of the story and like pull me out of everything I was enjoying back to this like reality that I didn't want to be in. His notes were like absolutely asinine as well. This book is set in Boston at the Boston Public Library, and I live near Boston. I live in New Hampshire, and he would say things like, that's not how New Englanders talk, or a New Englander would never say beanie. Who the hell is writing this book? And like, who the hell is this like Leo character who's editing this book? And where the hell is he from? Because he's not a real Bostonian if he like hasn't heard a New Englander use the word beanie. I know that sounds so petty, but like I couldn't get past that. I couldn't get past the editing notes in general, and then I especially couldn't get past the editing notes being wrong. So I DNF'd that around like 12%. And the last book that I DNF'd this year is one that I just DNF'd like a week ago at the time that I am filming this, and that is Echo North by Joanna Ruth Mayer. I feel like this book was trying way too hard to be way too many things. It was trying so hard to be Beauty and the Beast. It was trying so hard to be East by Edith Pateau. It was trying so hard to be like kind of like a Narnia or an Alice in Wonderland as well, with like this aspect of her like jumping through mirrors into different worlds. Too many elements trying to work like too many things into the plot, and I just like couldn't get into it. And also, I don't know, being like held captive by a wolf, it was a little too much for me. Anyway, those are not actually all of the books that I DNF'd this year. There are a couple more that I DNF'd that were some of my 5-star predictions, so I'm gonna hold off and I will let you know about those in my upcoming video about how my 5-star predictions went. So 2 of those 5-star predictions I ended up DNFing, and I will tell you all about those in a future video. But that is going to be all for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know down below like what books you did not finish this year and why, and if any of the books that I mentioned were like really like highly rated for you, and if I should maybe consider giving them another chance. So if you have a minute to spare, go like this video, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I post. I'll clue you in on a little secret. It's every Friday around 3 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon Eastern time, and I will see you back here again next week with a new video. Goodbye.